don't know if there's anything I should say. That was beautiful. And that's the message of my talk. Wherever you are, God is. Ernest Holmes says this: perhaps things are better than they appear to be. It is as though the prophet is telling us that even the divinity, the divine bounty itself, lavish and extravagant as it must be, awaits our acceptance. Possibly we have been holding our bowl of acceptance and our chalice of life upside down, so that even the fruit and wine of spirit cannot be poured into it. Yet the windows of heaven must forever be open. The windows are open. The question is our bowl turned upside down, or are we open to receive? Dr. Holmes also writes, it is the nature of the universe to give us what we are able to take. It cannot give us more. It has given all. We have not yet accepted the greater gift. And I have one final quote, and then I'm going to tell you a story. And when I'm done with the story, I'm going to sit down. There's a master teacher who used to only tell stories and then sit down. So I'm like, well, if he can do it, I can do it. One more quote. Appreciation, gratitude, and thanksgiving, the motive power which attracts and magnifies the hidden potentialities of life. So, here's the story. It's a story written by Leo Tolstoy, and it's called Two Old Men. I did not title it, and I did not put the ages in the story myself. However, it is called Two Old Men, and he says that the men are in their 60s. So, a couple of Russian gentlemen of Jewish descent, and they had made a commitment at some point in their lives that they were going to make a pilgrimage to Jerusalem. And years went by, and Ephraim and Elisha would talk to one another and say, when are we going to do this? When's the year? And Elisha was really excited about going. And Ephraim was always saying, oh, let's go next year. I've got this project going, I've got that project going. And it seemed like as soon as he finished one project, another one started. And so it was never really the time for him, he thought, to go on this pilgrimage. And so Elisha says, when are we going to do this? And he's like, well, let's wait till summer. And just to give you a little background on this pilgrimage, it was going to be on foot, hundreds of miles, until they got to the ocean, where they would take a ship, and then they would get off the ship and have to walk some more. That was the pilgrimage. This was like literally, I'm not driving to Mecca. No, I am walking to Mecca. And he says, let's wait till summer, let's wait till fall. And he says, if we keep waiting, we're never going to go. And he says, well, I've got all these things here at the house to do, and I've got these things to take care of. And Elisha says, have your son do it. He's a grown man. I mean, this is why we have children, so that in our older age, we can go on a journey and know that everything's going to be taken care of when we come back. He's like, oh, I don't know. So Elisha says, I'm not really sure we're ever going to get to go on this trip. And Ephraim went home that night and became very thoughtful about the whole process and decided, I guess I can do this. But he went back to Elisha and he says, we're going to need this much money to do it, right? And Elisha says, I don't even want to hear about money. You are worth 10 times more than I am, and I know that I can put together the money to go. He's like, how? You barely have, $30 to your name. And he says, well, I keep bees. I'll sell some of my bees off. And I'll do this and that. And he's like, I can take care of it. You don't have to worry about my money. I can worry about my money. He says, you need to worry about yours. And so Ephraim comes to Elisha's house that morning and says, all right, I'm ready to do this. And I'm feeling very parched all of a sudden. So they get together that next morning. They discuss all of the details, how much money it's going to take, who they have to leave in charge of their homes. I mean, this hundreds of mile trip is going to take months to do. And so they decide that in a week's time they're going to take off on their journey. And so they began to start. And Elisha was so excited. And Ephraim was excited. And surprisingly, Ephraim was a much better walker than Elisha was. And get this straight. And so he really kept a nice pace. And we're talking, they're walking miles and miles per day. And one afternoon, Elisha is thirsty. They've been walking for 8 hours. He wants to stop and rest and get something to drink. And Ephraim says, fine, you get something to drink. You can catch up with me. Which seems kind of counterintuitive to me. If I need to stop and get a drink, I also need you to wait with me because I'm not going to be able to run to catch up to you afterward. But Ephraim goes on, and Elisha walks through the small gate into this little yard. And as he begins to approach the house there, he says, hello, anyone home? And of course, I'm kind of modernizing this. I don't know all of the phrases. And nobody responds. Hello? Hello, anyone there? Still no one. And as he gets up close to the house, he sees that there is a man just lying on the ground in the full sun. And he's like, sir? No answer. So he calls into the home specifically, no answer. So he decides he's going to go in. So he goes through the door and up the stairs, and he finds a room where there's a young boy, a young girl, an old woman, a young woman, and the old woman is laying with her head on the table. The young boy is crying. The little girl's hidden in the corner, and the young woman is laying behind a stove, twitching. And he's like, could I impose upon you for a drink of water? And the old woman looks up and says, look around you. What am I going to get you water with? I've sold everything I have just to be here, and now we're completely out of food, and you can see the state of my family. You passed my son as you came in. We're just laying here waiting to die. And he takes his pack off of his back, and he opens it up, and he breaks off a piece of the bread that he had brought with him and gives it to the little boy. And of course, the little boy eats. He attempts to give it to the father, who has since crawled up the stairs and collapsed at the opening of the room. The father's too proud, won't take it. The little girl takes some. The old woman takes some. The young woman twitching behind the stove just keeps twitching. But he decided, I'm going to have to stay here for a little bit, just a couple of hours or so, and try and help these people. They clearly need some help. And so he stayed with them, and he got them some water, and he went out to where the well was and found the bucket that the old woman told him was going to be laying there because she had been walking out to get water and got so exhausted that she just had to turn around and come back, and she left her bucket. So he gets the bucket, he gets the water, he brings, and he continues to nurse and nurture these people. It's late that evening, and he says, well, I think I better just stay on for the night. It's not good to be walking out there at night. So with their permission, he stays the night. And the next morning he thinks, all right, I'm going to get up and get going. But there's still so much that he feels needs to be done for these people in order for them to even live. And so what ends up happening is he ends up staying. For weeks, he stays with these people and he attends to their needs, and he's the small amount of money that he had brought with him so that he could make this pilgrimage, he's using that so that he can take care of these people. And eventually he gets to the place where he says, if I spend much more of this, I'm not going to be able to make it on my pilgrimage at all. And yet I know that if I leave these people without any hope, they won't recover. They'll simply go back down the drain where they were going. And so instead of saving his money and going on his pilgrimage, he goes to the man to whom this family is indebted, and he pays off their debt so that they can have their land back and they can farm again. And he goes out and he buys them a horse and a cart. And as he comes back with the horse and the cart, the family, now not wanting to believe that this is actually happening for them, says, what should we do with your horse? And he says, you should put it in your stable. It's your horse. You're going to need this in order to plow your land. You're going to need this in order to plant your crops. And he stays on with them and he continues to take care of them. And he realizes, I don't have the money. I can't make my pilgrimage. It would be foolish to set off and try it. And so he turned home. And when he got back to his village, his family was delighted to see him. They welcomed him. He noticed that they had taken great care of everything while he was gone. And they said, you can't possibly have made it. He says, oh, I was on God's work. Nothing to do. So let's back up in the story to where he stops to get a cup of water. Ephraim continued walking, and he found himself a tree to rest under. And he thought, I'll just rest here. He'll get his water. He can catch up with me and we'll keep going. And he waited until night, and he still didn't come. Well, he kind of huddled down, trying to keep safe. And the next morning, he thought, well, surely he would be here by now. I guess if he's not, that must mean that maybe he got a ride from somebody and they passed me in the night and didn't see me sleeping here. And so he goes on his journey, thinking all along that at some point he's going to run into Elisha, because Elisha will surely have caught up with him. And they get to the port eventually where he's going to get the ship. And they have to wait 3 days. They get on the ship. He has this friend who he finds, and the friend is attempting to get him to be a stowaway on the boat. And he's like, no, I'm good. I planned. I got money for this. Gets on the boat. He knows at this point that there's no way that Elisha is already ahead of him because of how far along it took him to get there. And so he thinks, well, maybe he'll catch up with me. Well, they get off the boat at their destination, and they have a 40-mile walk to Jerusalem. Takes them 2.5 days, and they finally get there. And all along, this not-so-honest man who was trying to get him to be a stowaway on the boat kept just doing these little things that just kind of niggled at him and made him uncomfortable and made him think something wasn't right about this guy. And one night, he even proclaimed that someone had stolen his purse money, and he defined exactly how much it was and in what denominations. Ephraim looks in his bag and says, that's the exact amount of money I have. In the exact denominations I have it, this guy's trying to frame me. I know this is my money. So he says nothing, and it ends up that nothing comes of it. And yet he's just more and more uneasy about this man who's with him, who's kind of like latched onto him. And so they begin to make their pilgrimage around Jerusalem to all of the different sites, the holy places for prayer. And one day they're pressed into this room, and he's trying to get to the front, but there's so many of them, he can't get up there. And he peeks up, and he sees Elisha at the front of the room, like right in front of the altar. And he's like, I mean, it's very noticeable. This guy had a very distinct bald head, blah, blah, blah. He knew it was him. And he's up there praying, and he's like, how did he get here? I don't know. I don't get it. And so as the meeting comes to an end, he tries to press his way through the crowd so that he can get to Elisha. But by the time he gets to where Elisha is, Elisha isn't. And so he's like, huh. So the next day, there's more of this prayer. And again, he's trying to press forward and gets stuck at a pillar close to the back of the room. And once again, he sees his friend Elisha up front, totally basking in the prayer. He's like, I'm going to get him this time. And so he presses through again, trying to get to them. And once again, he doesn't get him. He's not there when he gets there. The third day, he's like, I am not going to miss him. And so he goes outside the building to the side door where everybody's walking out, and he waits one by one as all the people are going, and Elisha never comes out. He steps into the building, it's completely empty, and he's completely befuddled at where his friend could be. It was him. He knew it. So he goes on with his journey, and it comes time for him to head home. And he's got his, amount of money it's going to take him to get there. And he walks the 40 miles back to the port, gets on the ship, takes the boat ride, gets back off, and walks for weeks to get home. And when he gets home, he finds that his son, the one he didn't trust to keep everything in order, lived up to his expectations. He did not keep everything in order. In fact, he was at a bar when he got to town, and when he came home, he apparently had one too many drinks and began to cuss his father out. And he's like, how can you do this? He's like, what do you mean, how can you do this? You're a grown man, take care of your own stuff. So completely ungrateful. And when he gets home, he hears about Elisha, that Elisha was home. And so he says, I've got to go see him. I've got to find out how he got there ahead of me, how he got home ahead of me. I've got to find out. And so he goes to him and he says, what happened? Where were you? And he says, well, you know that place where I stopped? He says, I felt like I needed to stay. He says, yeah, I passed that place on my way back. He says, as I was walking through there, I couldn't believe it was the same place. There was happiness and liveliness, and crops were growing and people were singing. And he says, somebody from the very house that you went to came out to the street and got me and compelled me to come into the house with them, and compelled me to have water and refreshment. And he says, they would have been dead. How did they live? And Elisha says, God's working, I guess. And he says, well, I brought you some water from the Jordan, and I brought you some of this and some of that. He says, but I know I saw you there. And he's like, no, I was just doing my thing. I didn't get there. So, what he recognizes is that the person whose pilgrimage really took place when he stopped and began to act like God. And the one who insisted on going forward didn't really get the blessing he was hoping for. And so it makes me wonder how many times we get so set on a certain goal that we stop being God in the moment that we're in, so that we think, okay, well, when I get there, then I'll do it. See, if we're not taking the time right now, if I don't stop when I see the homeless person, if I don't stop when I see somebody who needs God's love right now, I'm not going to have God's love to give when I get to my destination. The story is way more complex than that. I've got like 30 pages here. I'm not going to bore you with any more of it. I think I just saw Florence and thank God. I'm sure she did. Florence asked me. The point is, let us not spend so much time thinking about being God someday as being God now. And then the question becomes, how do we do that? How do we become that? And I want to say, how do we become aware that we are? See, there is a power in us. God created us out of itself. There was nothing else in the beginning for it to create out of, and so therefore, when it spoke, the vibration coming from its mouth operated on the substance of itself and created us. So every bit of us is God. There's this song we sing here sometimes, I am the hands, I am the feet of God. Yeah, she's gonna start singing. It's not just a metaphor or a simile or whatever it is. I'm sure one of the teachers in the room can tell me. It's who we are. You know, if I don't stop to ease the pain of somebody in my path because there's somebody down the road that I need to see faster, then I've lost an opportunity. So for me, and I can only speak for myself and give you ideas, for me, the easiest way to get into that space of knowing that I am one of the one is to meditate. And I know everybody knows that that's my thing, I like that. And yet, the more frequently you do it, the easier and quicker it is to get into that space. See, our brains do this thing. This is the science part of religious science. Our brains do this thing where when we repeat an activity, when we repeat a thought, the channels become deeper. They become more ingrained. This is why habits are hard to break, because they actually create deeper grooves in the neuron paths, right? So it's harder to like jump the bank and get out and do something different. But if we're training our minds to do something positive, to remember the truth of who we are as the divine, then each time that we take that path, it gets just a little bit easier to remember. And I know that there are times when something will come up in my life and I will not feel like I'm one of the one. And I will feel like I am not working with other people who think they're one of the one. But just because we forget the truth doesn't mean that the truth isn't true. And so when that happens for me, it's like, okay, I see you trying to trick me. This is just God in a disguise. Sometimes it's a really good disguise. Sometimes it tests you to the limit of, no, this could not possibly be God. She knows. It happens. And so it becomes our practice to get into that place where we are so certain of who we are within the divine that no experience outside of ourselves can dissuade us from that truth. I was reading this morning, and the sentence stuck out to me. It said, if we are always getting our messages from outside of ourselves, then we are bound by the level of consciousness that is being inhabited by the person speaking. Whereas when we go within, there is no limit to the consciousness of God. And when we go within, that's what we're hearing. And so, in religious science, we're sometimes accused of being somewhat Pollyanna-ish, of burying our heads in the sand about what's going on in the world. At the ministers' gathering that I was at a couple of weeks ago, they asked, how do we keep science of mind relevant? And they all talked about all these fabulous things, and I said, we have to keep it real. If all we ever talk about is the good stuff going on and we completely ignore what's going on in the world, we are no longer relevant. But as long as we are using the principles that we teach to say, and this is how I deal with what's going on in the world, then we remain relevant. So, there's a lot of crap going on. There is. And our job is to be so firmly rooted in the truth of who God is within us that we cannot be moved off of it. And it's practice. There's a reason they call it spiritual practice. It does get easier. Florence is a pianist. Did it not get easier as you practiced and practiced and practiced? That's what we're called to do, to practice. Nobody in this room is called to demonstrate utter perfection. Now, I know that we talk about being magnificent and perfect. And things happen sometimes that even, we are doing them that don't really reveal a whole lot of perfection. And yet, perhaps it's the perfect thing to happen in that moment to put us back on the path. So, my invitation to you is find the thing that works for you to get you so grounded in the truth of who you are that you cannot be moved by external circumstances. Maybe it's journaling, maybe it's prayer, maybe it's meditation, maybe it's chanting. Whatever it is, whatever brings you into a closer awareness, a deeper knowledge of who you are within the divine, that is your job. That is your occupation. That is what should occupy your time. Now, that doesn't mean that we should go live on a mountaintop somewhere. As lovely as it might be to never have to deal with another human being, that's not the experience we signed up for when we became human. Now, there are some people who do those kind of spiritual retreats and they stay on the mountain. And what's the expression? They are so heavenly minded that they're of no earthly good. Our job is to take that deep awareness into everything we do. See, if I just spend my time meditating on the mountaintop, and when I come down into the valley and I'm a jerk to people, well, then my practice has been of no good use. It's taking that practice, allowing it to transform us into the awareness of who we are, so that as we interact with each and every person, we're saying, oh, I see God there. I gotcha. As opposed to, oh, this guy's in my way. I got a message from a friend of mine this week, and it said, I don't need anger management. I just need people to stay in their own lanes. See, people aren't going to stay in their own lane. They're going to cut you off and slam on their brakes and then make a quick right turn. And you're going to be like, there was no one behind me for miles. And I don't pretend to say that those kinds of things happen. I don't think that it's God saying, oh, I want you to slow down. I want you to see this thing. Because I don't think God does that. I think what God does, when it's smart, is say, oh, I just got slowed down. If I pay attention right here, what could I learn? And for me, the lesson is always going to be, this too is God. This person, maybe their stomach hurts. Maybe they really need to get to the restroom. So the job is go to the mountain and live your life in the valley. Let's pray. Recognizing God as all. I know that it is all that I am, all that each and every person in this room is, all any of us ever could be. And yet within that is all of the potential of the divine. All of the possibility that exists in that one divine mind. In that mind in which we all are a part. Recognizing that all of the qualities of the divine exist everywhere, and so they are fully present, existent in me, as me, working through me. And I can use that power to bless myself, I can use that power to bless the world, and I can use it to make everyone better off. See, because even when it just begins with me, I know that I'm making some influence in my circle. And so I'm just so deeply grateful that the way God's law works is I simply have to bring my attention to it. And with my attention brought to the truth of God, that truth is made manifest in my life. And so with deep gratitude for knowing that Spirit has always had this handled, it's just waiting for us to open up our vessel and receive, I can simply let God do its magnificent thing, stepping out of the way and letting God be God. And so it is. All right. Just soak that in for a second. All right. It is now the time of our service where we collect our tithes and offerings. And I just ask you, if this service has been a blessing to you, that you bless it back, that our walls, our mission, our purpose be expanded so that one day everyone recognizes their own spiritual magnificence. And I'm going to invite the ushers to come forward. I'm going to invite Daniel to come back up to the piano. He's got another song for us. And let us read our offering affirmation together. John, step out, please. There we go. I freely and joyously give from the abundance and fullness of my overflowing wealth, knowing my gift goes with love as it touches and blesses the world. And so it is.